Leaders from the group of 7 major industrialized nations sat down for the first round of talks in Italy. High on the agenda, the fight against terrorism. Trump's confrontational remarks in Brussels on the eve of the 2-day summit in the Mediterranean resort town of Taormina has cast a spell over a meeting that hopes to soften his position on climate change. For the British Prime Minister Theresa May and French President Emmanuel Macron, it will be an opportunity to discuss the fight against terrorism on the sidelines of the summit.
The incident shows why it's so important for us to work together in defeating terrorism, and I look forward to the opportunity now to speak directly with you, but of course also for the discussions here more widely at this G7 on how we can work further to defeat the terrorists.
And first of all, I want to give here my condolences, obviously, for Manchester. And we were very shocked because we know this kind of attack, we know how it can hurt the whole people of your country, but more generally from Europe.
US President Donald Trump, French President Emmanuel Macron, Italian Prime Minister Paolo Gentiloni, and British Prime Minister Theresa May are attending the elite club for the first time. Meanwhile, activists from the environmental group Greenpeace dressed a mock Statue of Liberty in a life vest and submerged her in the Mediterranean Sea.
G7 countries played a major role in polluting our planet and must now lead the way to the solution.
Trump, who dismissed human-made global warming as a hoax during his election campaign, is threatening to pull the United States out of the 2015 climate deal clinched in Paris in 2015. Lehana Tsotetsi, SABC News.
So, Donald Trump's first major travels started in the Middle East and went to Italy, but now he's with the G7, and the reception's supposedly not so cordial, but Theresa May is one of the leaders that are bringing him to task, and he's...
Yes, yeah. You were saying earlier she's under a bit of pressure. It looks like Labour is doing well in Britain. Let's see what she's saying to other world leaders in Sicily now.
Moving from the battlefield to the internet. In the UK, we are already working with social media companies to halt the spread of extremist material and hateful propaganda that is warping young minds. But I am clear that corporations can do more. Indeed, they have a social responsibility to now step up their efforts to remove harmful content from their networks. Today, I called on leaders to do more. We agreed a range of steps the G7 could take to strengthen its work with tech companies on this vital agenda, and ministers will meet soon to take this forward. We want companies to develop tools to identify and remove harmful materials automatically, and in particular, I want to see them report this vile content to the authorities and block the users who spread it. And the G7 will put its weight behind the creation of an international industry-led forum where new technologies and tools can be developed and shared to help us deny terrorists their pernicious voice online. It is also vital we do more to cooperate with our partners in the region to step up returns and prosecutions of foreign fighters. This means improving intelligence sharing, evidence gathering, and bolstering countries' police and legal processes. The investigation into what happened in Manchester is ongoing, but the suicide bombers' links to Libya undoubtedly shine a spotlight on this largely ungoverned space on the edge of Europe. So we must redouble our support for a UN-led effort that brings all the parties to the negotiating table and reduces the threat of terror from that region. Similarly, in the case of Syria, we agreed that it will be impossible to defeat terrorism without a political settlement that brings a stable transition away from President Assad. We welcomed the progress towards de-escalation, but are clear that the regime's backers, Russia and Iran, must use their influence to deliver a ceasefire and move to a genuine political process. Leaders agreed today that we must challenge Iran's destabilizing activity in Syria and the wider region, and that we must continue our efforts to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapons capability. Leaders were united in their condemnation of North Korea's continued nuclear weapons and ballistic missile tests. we agreed to increase pressure on Pyongyang as we work to secure a peaceful resolution in the region. This afternoon, I led a discussion on trade and the global economy. As we prepare to leave the European Union, I reiterated the UK's abiding commitment to free trade and open markets. But I and my fellow world leaders also recognised that some people feel left behind by globalisation and that not all countries are playing by the rules. We need to show our citizens that the global economy can truly work for everyone. This means recognising the importance of the international rules-based system and the World Trade Organization in creating a level playing field for trade, but accepting that we need to make the system work better. And it means taking action to ensure that all our citizens can share in the benefits of globalisation and support those who feel they have lost out. The UK's industrial strategy of economic and social reform is helping spread growth and opportunity to all parts of our country and society. We are ensuring people have the skills to capitalise on the opportunities presented by new technologies and a digital economy at the start of and throughout their careers. And as we work to make the UK an even more attractive place for businesses to invest and grow, we want companies to act responsibly and play their part in making ours a country that works for everyone. We had a productive discussion today about the importance of global action against climate change to safeguard the prosperity and security of future generations. The UK remains committed to this agenda. We will keep energy affordable and maintain a secure and reliable supply in order to protect the interests of businesses and consumers. Clearly, the global challenges we face today are more urgent than ever before. When it comes to the fight against terrorism, we can only defeat this evil together with determined and coordinated action. As the G7, we stand united today in our commitment to uphold the values we share and create a safe, secure and prosperous future for all our citizens. Thank you. Now, take some questions. John.
Prime Minister, leaders have agreed to do more and to do more together to fight terrorism. Can you say that you have done enough to provide funds, powers and police numbers when you consider the Manchester bomber was known to the authorities? And if I may, what do you say to those who argue that British military operations abroad have increased the risk of terrorism at home?
Well, first of all, let's be very clear on police funding that we have protected counter-terrorism police funding. We've increased the funding for our security and intelligence agencies, and we continue to provide them with the support they need. And you talk about powers. Actually, as Home Secretary, of course, I oversaw the Investigatory Powers Act going through Parliament, which ensures that our agencies have the powers that they need. Now, you've asked me a question about the issue of British foreign policy, and I'm aware this is an issue that has been raised today, and I want to be very clear about what has been said today. What's happened today is I have been here at the G7 working with other international leaders to fight terrorism. At the same time, Jeremy Corbyn has said that terror attacks in Britain are our own fault, and he's chosen to do that just a few days after one of the worst terrorist atrocities we have experienced in the United Kingdom. And I want to make one thing very clear to Jeremy Corbyn and to you, and it is that there can never, ever be an excuse for terrorism. There can be no excuse for what happened in Manchester. And I think that the choice that people face at the general election has just become starker. It's a choice between me working constantly to protect the national interest and to protect our security, and Jeremy Corbyn, who frankly isn't up to the job. Jason.
Jason Groves from the Daily Mail. Prime Minister, you mentioned the election. You started this campaign a few weeks ago, 20 points ahead in the polls. You're now apparently 5 points ahead in the polls. What's gone wrong with your campaign, and what are you going to do in the next fortnight to put it right?
The only poll that counts, Jason, when it comes to elections is the poll that takes place on election day. And I will continue to be out campaigning across the country. Obviously, you will recognise that we suspended campaigning for a period following the terrible attack that took place in Manchester in respect for those who sadly lost their lives and those who were injured in that terrible attack. But I will be out for the rest of the campaign across the country and pointing out several things to people. First of all, that there is this clear choice between myself and me and my team, the strong and stable leadership and the strong and stable government that we will show and will provide for the country, working in the national interest, getting the best possible deal out of Brexit, or Jeremy Corbyn and a coalition of chaos propped up by the Lib Dems and the SNP. And this issue of the Brexit negotiations matters because the European Union wants them to start just 11 days after the election. So we have to have a government that knows what its approach is going to be and that has the strong hand to take into that negotiating process to get the best possible deal. And you refer to the polls, and of course, if you look at the figures that were in the House of Commons before it was dissolved, the loss of just 6 seats would mean that my government would lose its majority. So when people go to the polls, they have a very stark choice. Strong and stable leadership under me and my team, getting the best deal for Britain from Brexit, or a coalition of chaos under Jeremy Corbyn, failing to protect our national security. George?
George Parker from the Financial Times. You had a meeting this morning with President Macron. I just wondered whether he was someone you felt you could do business with on the question of Brexit. And specifically, you were talking to him about the possibility of running simultaneous discussions on the divorce proceedings and also the future trade arrangement. Did he give any ground on that issue?
Well, I had a very good and productive discussion, constructive discussion with President Macron. The relationship that the United Kingdom has with France is an important one for us. We have very clear cooperation on a whole range of areas, including on our security and on defence matters. And as regards Brexit, I'm very clear and I remain clear that we have under the treaty up to 2 years to negotiate withdrawal and the future relationship. And when we leave the European Union, it's important that we know not just the withdrawal terms, but also what that future relationship will be, which of course will cover trade. We want a comprehensive free trade agreement, but also cover cooperation in other areas as well. Beth.
Thank you. Beth Rigby, Sky News. Prime Minister, your Defence Secretary said last year that 400 foreign fighter extremists had returned to the UK since 2014. You've been Home Secretary, you were Home Secretary for 6 of the past 7 years. You could have potentially tackled this years ago. Were you thwarted by David Cameron, or did you drop the ball?
Well, yes, it is the case that we believe that a number of foreign fighters those who went to Syria have returned to the UK. It's very clear we actually took some extra powers in legislation when I was Home Secretary to manage the return of individuals, and those are looked at on a case-by-case basis. But I think if you just look at what we have done over the last 6 to 7 years, I excluded more hate preachers from the United Kingdom than any Home Secretary has ever done before. We did not hesitate to act in protecting our national security. Yes. Tom.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Tom Newton-Dunn from The Sun. Can you possibly confirm that your intent towards clamping down on the internet companies includes asking them to break their own encryptions when they pass data to the intelligence services and security agencies? And also, at the moment, and still, your plan is a voluntary one for the internet companies in the hope they will comply. They haven't complied very much so far, so what will you do to make sure they comply if they again refuse?
What has happened today is that we have seen the leaders of 7 countries, the G7 countries, come together to recognise the importance of dealing with this issue of terrorist propaganda and terrorist hatred and terrorist activity online. That is a significant step forward. We've also, as I say, have put our full weight behind the creation of this industry-wide forum, which will be looking to encourage that development of technology and techniques that can be used to take material down. And I'm very clear that we want to see this being done more urgently, more rapidly than it is at the moment in terms of taking material off the internet. But it is also the case that I think it's important that companies recognise their social responsibility and do report matters that they become aware of to the authorities. We need to work together to fight against the evil of terrorism, and nobody can be in any doubt after what happened in Manchester of just how evil those terrorists are. Francis.
Encryption?
Well, encryption is an issue which we have, in overall terms, it's important that people feel that they're able to be safe and secure on the internet. What we do want to do is to work with the companies to ensure that they can take down material that is of extremist terrorist content, that is promoting this hateful ideology and promoting the terrorism, but also that they, as I say, do report when they are aware of this material, that they report it to the authorities so that appropriate action can be taken. Francis.
Prime Minister, you raised the issue of Libya. What link is there between Libya and the current domestic terrorist threat situation in the UK? And with the benefit of hindsight, was our intervention there a success?
The question of what's happened in relation to the investigation, obviously certain information has been made public about the links that the individual who perpetrated this attack had with Libya. Obviously, this is an ongoing investigation. What we discussed today, though, was the wider issue of how we ensure that we have within Libya the stability that we all want to see. Libya is a country that is important not just in relation to these matters, but also, as you'll be aware, in relation to migration of people through trying to reach Europe. And we're very clear that a UN-led process, we want to increase our efforts to ensure that the UN-led process can be a successful one. Yeah.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Jack Blanchard from the Daily Mirror. If I can just take you back to police funding, as you say, you've protected counter-terrorism funding and you've increased money for security services, but you have also overseen the removal of around 20,000 police officer jobs, and the Police Federation have said themselves that the reason we now have army on the streets of Britain for the first time in such a long time is because they no longer have the resources to do the job. Now, don't you bear some responsibility for that?
No, the plan to ensure that there was military support available to the police was one that is a well-prepared plan. It was developed a while ago. It was done so that at a time when we go to critical in our threat level, which of course is determined independently by the Joint Terrorism Analysis Centre, that extra support could be made available. And that is exactly what has happened. Can I just ask, do I have Emanuele Riccardi? Yes. Well, good.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. So, what is it true that about the climate there is still no agreement with President Trump, and at the end the solution could be 6 against 1? Thank you.
Yeah. We had a very good discussion about the importance of this issue of climate change and about how we address this issue of climate change. I think the United States is considering its position in relation to these matters and what its policy is going to be, but there was no doubt around the table about how important this particular issue on climate change is. And we were all very clear about that and about the role that the Paris Agreement plays in that. I'll take a couple more. Yes.
Thank you. Anish Kristana from The Guardian. Prime Minister, you talk about the difference between yourself and Jeremy Corbyn, so I want to just ask you a domestic issue. Earlier this week, the Daily Telegraph said your social care plans were in chaos and many pensioners had been left in confusion. Prime Minister, will you reassure those pensioners by telling them before the election what level you will set the social care cap at, and also who it is who will be losing their winter fuel allowance?
Well, let's be very clear about what we have done in our manifesto in relation to social care matters. We face as a country a very significant challenge in the fact that we do have an ageing society. The figure, which I suspect, Anushka, you may have heard me use before, is that in just a decade we will have 2 million more people aged over 75. Now, unless we address the long-term sustainability of our social care system, the system will collapse. So I want to ensure that people have the confidence of knowing that they will have the care that they need and the dignity in their old age. And that's why we have put together, brought this social care package forward. And it is a social care package, which means that nobody will have to sell their house in their lifetime. They will be able to ensure that they don't see their savings being virtually wiped out, and they will have money to pass on to their children. And there will be a cap set on the overall amount of money that they spend on social care. What's important about this is that it is a plan which ensures long-term sustainability in the system, because without that, the system will simply collapse. So I'll take a couple more questions. Yes.
Prime Minister, Tim Ross from Bloomberg. In any relationship, particularly a special one, if one partner messes up, it's usually a good idea to apologise. Did Donald Trump say sorry to you for the leaks on intelligence when you met yesterday or today? And would you continue to describe the transatlantic relationship as a special one?
The relationship between the United Kingdom and the United States of America has been a special relationship now for many years and does continue to be one. They are our most significant defence and security partner. Yes, I did raise the issue of leaks of information that have been shared by the police with the FBI with President Trump. He has made clear that that was unacceptable. The Metropolitan Police have, as I understand it, received assurances from the FBI and are now have restarted the process of sharing information with them. I'll take one last question.
Prime Minister, just to go back to the election, when you called the election, it was a case of trying to increase your majority so that you could get the Brexit talks through. Given the latest polls are now down to 5% in your favour, has this now just turned into a fight just to stay in power and keep your job?
No, I'm very clear why I called the election. I was concerned that when we went through the process, we triggered Article 50, but it was clear to me that there were other parties in Parliament who wanted to frustrate the Brexit negotiations, who did not want to enable us to have the best possible deal for Britain, that we are the only party that is respecting the will of the British people and is committed to delivering on the vote that they took in the referendum for us to leave the European Union. When it comes to the choice on the 8th of June, there's a clear choice for people to take, in the knowledge that 11 days after that election, those Brexit negotiations will start. The choice is there's only going to be one of two people sitting around that Brexit negotiating table for the United Kingdom. It's either going to be me or Jeremy Corbyn. And that is the choice that people will be facing. Me and my team, with that strong and stable leadership, going into those negotiations with a clear plan for the Brexit negotiations and a clear plan for a stronger Britain beyond Brexit, or a coalition of chaos, Jeremy Corbyn being propped up by the Liberal Democrats and the SNP. Thank you.
So that was the British Prime Minister, Theresa May, who was speaking post-meetings that have been happening with the G7 that have been underway in Sicily and Italy. And it sort of went through the G7 story, but quickly sort of came back to what's happening back home, the elections that are due and coming up soon, and defending her position, her party. What's the expression that she uses?
Strong and stable leadership. And I don't know if you've seen the montages. She says this whenever she can. Strong and stable would be the Conservatives if they are elected in the upcoming election, compared to the coalition of chaos that Labour would bring, and slamming the Labour leader because he said terror in the UK is its own fault. So you're right, a lot of electioneering going on.
But talking about the G7, she said that the leaders did meet and they had discussed, amongst other things, fighting terrorism among platforms such as the internet, on social media, improving intelligence and sharing and gathering. And this, of course, hot on the heels of what happened in Manchester and leaks that were made by America about the intelligence that the British investigators had shared with them.
So interesting, she's now saying that they are re-sharing information. Basically, the Brits stopped sharing information with America, fearing that the FBI was leaking to media outlets. She said that they're now re-sharing, and she did raise it with the US President Donald Trump. He said it was unacceptable. And she was pushed on that because, of course, Trump's behavior, again in the spotlight, calling Germany bad, very bad, talking about NATO again, and not really understanding NATO according to some of the other leaders. So she was pushed on her relationship with Donald Trump, saying that the relationship between the two countries continues to be a special one, diplomatically.
It is an odd statement that he made about Germans being really bad. He says, look at the millions of cars they sell in the US, it's terrible. He forgets, of course, that American cars are all over the world, but that's another story. North Korea came up again, and it will continue with their weapons testing. She talked about Syria and about Russia needing to be talked to and those backers of the Syrian regime, as she described it. And then she also talked about globalization, which was a big WEF theme, that as globalization happens, people shouldn't be left behind, and it's up to governments to make sure that everybody plays by the rules. And I suppose she's pointing a finger at a few governments, without naming them, that haven't always played by the globalization rules.
And picking out Trump again, because he's always appealing to those people who feel left out of globalization, perhaps undermining free trade. All right, so that was from the G7, and we've got our own politics.